After I won an award at work, I invited my family to celebrate, but they all refused to come, saying it was just some silly work thing. I was staring at my phone when the notification lit up. The family group chat. My heart did that stupid, hopeful flutter it always does, even though I should know better by now. Can't wait to see everyone at the ceremony on Saturday, 7 p.m. at the Grand Hall downtown. I'd sent it 3 days ago. Radio silence since then. But now my sister had finally responded. Except she hadn't responded in our family group chat. She'd responded in her chat with my mom and dad, and somehow accidentally sent it to the family group instead. Ugh, do we really have to go to her little office thing? I need you guys to come shopping with me this weekend. I'm having a crisis about what to wear to dinner with his parents next month. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Little office thing. My grandmother's response came within seconds. What ceremony is Natalie talking about? The dots appeared under my mom's name. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Just some work award thing. Nothing major. I watched my grandmother typing. The dots went on forever. When her message finally came through, it was in all caps. Call me right now. I didn't want to call anyone. I wanted to disappear into my couch and pretend I hadn't seen any of this. But my phone was already ringing. Tell me about this ceremony, she said. No hello, no preamble. It's nothing really, just Natalie. Her voice had that edge that meant she wasn't playing. Tell me. So I did. I told her about the floods last month, about the emergency displacement crisis, about the 72 hours I'd spent working with the city to prevent 47 families from losing their homes. I'd negotiated emergency housing protections, filed injunctions against predatory landlords trying to exploit the disaster, coordinated with 3 different aid organizations. The legal aid organization was giving me their annual humanitarian award. And your parents said it was nothing major? I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm being dramatic. It's just a plaque and a dinner. Stop, she said. Stop making yourself smaller for them. I pressed my palm against my stomach, where the secret I'd been keeping for 4 months was just starting to show. Twins. I'd found out at 8 weeks, right before the floods hit. I'd been waiting for the right moment to tell everyone. Now I just felt stupid for thinking there would ever be a right moment. They do this to you, my grandmother continued, her voice shaking slightly. Your sister needs new shoes. It's a family emergency. You're being honored for saving families from homelessness. It's nothing major. She didn't mean it like that, I said. But even I didn't believe it. Yes, she did. And your parents meant it when they chose shopping over supporting you. She was quiet for a moment. I should have stopped this years ago. I thought they'd realize what they were doing. But they're doing to you exactly what your grandfather did to me. He always favored your uncle in the business. I watched him overlook me for decades, and I never said anything. Now history is repeating itself, and I'm done being quiet. My sister's next message popped up. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But seriously, Mom, can we please go shopping? I really need you right now. I needed you too, I thought. I needed you 4 months ago when I saw 2 heartbeats on that ultrasound screen. I needed you 3 weeks ago when I worked myself to exhaustion making sure families had roofs over their heads. But I just typed, it's fine. You guys enjoy your weekend. My grandmother's response was immediate. No, it is not fine. We need to talk. I set my phone face down and pulled a blanket over my lap. Through the fabric, I could feel the small swell of my belly that nobody knew about yet. I'd been so careful to hide it, wearing loose clothes, positioning myself strategically in video calls. I'd imagined telling them in some perfect moment. Instead, I was sitting alone, crying over a group chat, wondering if I was overreacting, wondering if they'd ever really loved me, or if I'd just been the difficult daughter who didn't fit their vision, the one who chose legal aid over corporate law, who chose advocacy over money. My phone buzzed again. My uncle. Congratulations, sweetheart. We're all very proud of you. What time should we arrive? Then my cousin. Wouldn't miss it for the world. My aunt. I'm bringing my camera. This is incredible. Natalie. One by one, the extended family filled the chat with excitement and support. Everyone except my parents and my sister, who'd gone silent. I pulled the blanket tighter and closed my eyes, my hands resting on the secret I was carrying. These babies would never doubt their worth, I promised myself. They would never wonder if they were loved. They would never feel like they had to earn basic respect, even if that meant protecting them from my own parents. The thing about being the disappointing daughter is that you can pinpoint exactly when it started. For me, it was the 6th grade science fair when I won first place with a project on water purification systems for developing countries. My mom had smiled tightly and said, That's nice, sweetie. Then spent the car ride home talking about my sister's upcoming dance recital. My sister was 8 then, all tutus and pirouettes, everything my mother had wanted me to be. Feminine, graceful, socially effortless. I was the one who showed up to family parties with a book, who'd rather debate Supreme Court cases than gossip about boys, who made my father uncomfortable because I asked too many questions about his corporate law practice. Why do you only represent big companies? I'd asked him once when I was 13. What about people who can't afford lawyers? He'd laughed and ruffled my hair like I was adorable and naive. That's not real law, Natalie. That's activism. There's no future in that. I proved him wrong by getting into law school a year early, by graduating top of my class, by turning down every corporate offer to work in legal aid. He still hasn't forgiven me for it. My mother's disappointment ran deeper, though, rooted in something I could never control. She'd been a model in her 20s, the kind of beautiful that made people stop and stare. She'd given it up when she got pregnant with me, and I think part of her never stopped resenting that sacrifice, especially because I looked nothing like her. I got my father's practical features, his sturdy build, his serious eyes. My sister got my mother's delicate bone structure, her luminous skin, her effortless charm. By the time my sister was 16, my mother was living vicariously through her, planning her wardrobe, coaching her on how to pose for photos, pushing her toward the social success she'd never quite achieved herself. Your sister needs guidance, she'd tell me whenever I complained about the attention disparity. You've always been so independent. She needs us more. But independence wasn't a choice. It was survival. When you realize your parents don't quite see you, don't quite understand you, don't quite approve of the person you're becoming, you either crumble or you build yourself into something that doesn't need their validation. I chose the latter. Or maybe it chose me. My grandmother had watched this play out from the sidelines. She'd call me sometimes just to talk, to ask about my cases, to actually listen when I explained the complexities of tenant rights law. It wasn't until yesterday's phone call that I understood why. Your grandfather built that business from nothing, she'd told me after we hung up with my parents. And when your uncle turned 18, he started bringing him to meetings, teaching him everything. I'd been working in that office since before your uncle was born. But suddenly I was just the wife who answered phones. When your father was born, I thought maybe... But no. The oldest son got everything. I got to watch. Why didn't you say something? I'd asked. Because I thought that was just how things were. And by the time I realized it wasn't, the pattern was set. I watched your father grow up seeing women as secondary, and then he married your mother, and she was so beautiful, so perfect for his image. But she'd given up her career. And I think she resented you for inheriting his features instead of hers, for being brilliant instead of beautiful, for not being the daughter she could live through. I'd cried on the phone then, finally hearing someone acknowledge what I'd always felt but never wanted to believe. And your sister, my grandmother had continued softly. She knows she's the favorite. She's always known. But favorites are prisoners too. Natalie. She's terrified of losing their approval, of having to stand on her own. Everything she does is about maintaining that position. She can't afford for you to be celebrated because it threatens the only identity she has. Now, sitting in my apartment, I thought about my sister's panic attack last year when our parents suggested she get a job. She'd been 26, living at home, funded by their credit card. The thought of independence had sent her into a spiral that lasted weeks. They'd backed off, called her sensitive, said she needed more time. When I'd moved out at 22, they'd barely helped me pack. My phone buzzed. My grandmother. I'm coming over tomorrow. We need to talk about Saturday and about those babies you're carrying. Yes, I figured it out. A great-grandmother knows. I smiled despite everything, my hand moving to my stomach. At least someone was paying attention. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next one. I kept replaying the group chat message in my head, dissecting every word, wondering if I was making too much of it. Maybe they really did have plans. Maybe my sister genuinely needed support. Maybe I was being selfish, expecting them to drop everything for me. At 3 a.m. on Thursday, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Christmas mornings where my sister got 3 times as many presents. My high school graduation where they'd left early for her volleyball game. My law school acceptance party that got canceled because she had a bad breakup and needed them. But there were good memories too. My dad teaching me to ride a bike. My mom braiding my hair before picture day. Family dinners where we all laughed together. Those moments felt real, didn't they? The pregnancy hormones weren't helping. Everything felt amplified, raw. I'd cry over commercials, then cry because I was crying. My therapist had warned me that the second trimester would bring emotional intensity. But I hadn't expected this constant war between hurt and guilt. Because I did feel guilty. The extended family was in the group chat now, calling out my parents, demanding explanations. My aunt had posted something cryptic on social media about showing up for the people who matter. My uncle had apparently called my father directly. The whole family knew, and I felt responsible for the chaos. "You're causing drama," my sister had texted me privately. "Can't you just let it go? They're going through a lot right now." "What are they going through?" I'd asked. "Just stuff. You wouldn't understand." That was her favorite phrase. You wouldn't understand. As if my feelings were somehow less valid than hers, my struggles less real. But what if she was right? What if I was being overdramatic? What if the hormones were making me blow this out of proportion? It was just one event. They'd been there for plenty of other things. Hadn't they? I tried to remember. My college graduation, they'd come, but left right after the ceremony for my sister's birthday dinner. My first big case win. My dad had said, "Good for you," and changed the subject. The time I was hospitalized with pneumonia. They'd visited once, briefly, because my sister had a date she was nervous about. My grandmother showed up Friday afternoon with homemade soup and the kind of no-nonsense energy that made me feel like I could breathe again. "You look terrible," she said, setting the soup on my kitchen counter. "Thanks." "I mean it. You're not sleeping. You're second-guessing yourself." She sat down at my small dining table and gestured for me to join her. "Tell me what you're thinking." So I did. I told her everything. The guilt, the confusion, the fear that I was being vindictive instead of just hurt, the worry that I was manufacturing drama, that I was being ungrateful, that I was the problem. "And what if my babies end up being just like me?" I said, my voice cracking. "What if they're serious and bookish and not what my parents want? What if I have to watch my children go through what I went through?" My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, spotted with age, but her grip was firm. "Then you protect them," she said. "That's what I should have done for you. I should have said something when you were young, when the pattern was just starting. Instead, I told myself it would get better, that your parents would realize what they were doing. I was wrong. But what if I'm wrong about them? What if they love me and I just can't see it? Love isn't just a feeling, Natalie. It's action. It's showing up. It's choosing someone even when it's inconvenient." She squeezed my hand. "Do you know what your mother said to me when I called her yesterday? She said you were always so capable, so independent, that you didn't need them the way your sister did. As if needing less attention meant deserving less love." I felt tears sliding down my face. I tried so hard to be what they wanted. "No, sweetheart. You tried so hard to be good enough for them to love. But that's not how it works. You were always enough. They're the ones who failed to see it." We sat in silence for a while, my grandmother's hand warm in mine. Outside my window, the city moved on. People living their lives, unaware of my small crisis, my breaking family, my uncertain future. "Tomorrow," my grandmother said finally, "you're going to walk into that ceremony with your head high. You're going to accept that award for the incredible work you did. And you're going to let yourself feel proud, not guilty, not conflicted." Proud? I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it yet. The floods had started on a Tuesday. I'd been working late at the office when my phone lit up with emergency alerts, and within an hour, the city's low-income neighborhoods were underwater. I'd driven through rising water to get to the community center, where families were already gathering with whatever they'd managed to grab. I was 12 weeks pregnant then, though nobody knew. The nausea had been brutal for weeks, but I'd gotten good at hiding it. At keeping crackers in my desk drawer, at timing my bathroom breaks, at pressing my hand to my stomach when no one was looking and whispering promises to the tiny lives growing inside me. The first night, I'd worked until 4 in the morning, coordinating with the city's emergency services, calling every contact I had in housing advocacy, filing emergency motions to prevent landlords from evicting displaced tenants. I'd thrown up twice in the bathroom, once from morning sickness and once from exhaustion, then gone back to making phone calls. By Wednesday afternoon, I'd identified 47 families at immediate risk. Their buildings were damaged, insurance companies were already denying claims, and landlords were circling like vultures with eviction notices. These weren't just statistics. They were people. A grandmother with 3 grandchildren, a single father with a newborn, a family who'd just started to rebuild after the last disaster. I'd sat in a folding chair at the shelter, my laptop balanced on my knees, drafting injunctions while pregnant women around me tried to soothe crying babies. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was pregnant too, but I couldn't stop to rest. If I stopped, These families would lose everything. Thursday, the nausea got worse. I'd been standing in front of a judge, arguing for emergency housing protections, when the courtroom started spinning. I'd gripped the podium, forced myself to focus. Made my case. The judge granted the injunction. I'd made it to the bathroom before collapsing. One of my colleagues had found me there 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor with my head between my knees, trying not to pass out. "Are you sick?" she'd asked. "You need to go home." "I can't. The housing authority meeting is in an hour." These families, "Natalie, you're going to kill yourself." I'd almost laughed. I was growing 2 humans while trying to save 47 families from homelessness. Kill myself seemed like an understatement. Friday had been the worst. The building inspectors were finishing their assessments, and I'd spent the day running between 3 different locations, carrying boxes of legal documents because the power was out, and I couldn't print anything. My back ached. My feet were swollen. I'd been wearing the same clothes for 3 days. I'd been climbing stairs to reach a housing authority office on the 4th floor when it happened. The cramping started suddenly, sharp and terrifying. I'd dropped the box of documents, papers scattering down the stairs, and pressed both hands to my stomach. Not now. Please, not now. I'd sat down on the stairs, breathing through the pain, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't lose them. Not after everything. Not when families were depending on me. Not when I'd already imagined their faces, their personalities, their futures. The cramping had lasted 15 minutes. 15 minutes of me sitting alone in a dark stairwell, praying to anyone who might be listening. When it finally stopped, I'd gathered the papers, climbed the stairs, and finished the meeting. Later, in the emergency room, the doctor had looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You're pregnant with twins," she'd said, pointing at the ultrasound screen. "And you've been doing what?" "Working. There was an emergency." "You are the emergency. Your blood pressure is through the roof. You're dehydrated. You're showing signs of extreme stress." She'd leaned forward. "If you keep this up, you could lose them. Do you understand?" I'd understood. But I'd also understood that 47 families were counting on me, and I was the only one who could help them. So I'd gone back to work. By Saturday, when the last family was safely housed with legal protections in place, I'd worked 102 hours in 5 days. I'd lost 8 pounds. I'd had 3 more false alarm cramping episodes. But everyone was safe. Now, walking into tomorrow's ceremony, everyone would see the photos from that week. Me, arguing in court with dark circles under my eyes. Me, at the shelter coordinating with aid workers. Me, carrying boxes up those stairs. What they wouldn't see in the photos was that I was pregnant, that I was terrified, that I was risking everything. But my family would know, once I told them. And their absence would mean something different then. Not just missing a ceremony, but missing the recognition of what I'd sacrificed, what I'd risked, what their future grandchildren had endured because I couldn't stop fighting for people who needed help. I touched my stomach, where the twins were growing steadier now, stronger. I'd made it through. We'd all made it through. Tomorrow, I'd tell everyone. Tomorrow, the world would know what this award really meant. Saturday morning, my phone lit up at 8 a.m. "Hi, honey. We won't be able to make it tonight. Your sister really needs us right now. She's going through something difficult. I'm sure you understand. Congratulations on your award." I stared at the message for 5 minutes. The exclamation point felt like a slap. Congratulations, but not enough to actually show up. I typed and deleted 3 different responses. Finally, I just sent back a thumbs up emoji. My grandmother called immediately. "Don't you dare cancel on yourself." "I'm not. I'll be there." "Good. I'll pick you up at 6. Wear something that makes you feel powerful." I chose a navy dress that hid the small bump but fit well everywhere else. When I looked in the mirror, I almost looked like someone who had it together. The grand hall was more crowded than I'd expected. The floods had brought media attention. There were reporters with cameras, local officials, even television crews. My grandmother arrived right on time, wearing her best suit and the pearls my grandfather had given her 40 years ago. "Ready?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The extended family had claimed 3 rows near the front. My aunt, uncle, cousins, even relatives I barely knew had shown up. They waved when they saw me, their faces full of genuine pride. My grandmother guided me to a seat reserved for honorees. My parents' empty seats in the family section felt like a black hole. I kept glancing at the door, hoping they'd rush in at the last minute. They didn't. At 7:15, the ceremony began. I was last, the humanitarian award that closed the evening. When my video started playing on the screens, I wasn't prepared. The organization had compiled footage from the flood week. News clips, photos from the shelter, courthouse footage. There I was, exhausted and determined, arguing for families who couldn't argue for themselves. I saw myself carrying boxes up those stairs. I saw myself at the shelter, surrounded by families I'd helped, children hugging my legs. I saw myself leaving the courthouse after the final injunction, my shoulders sagging with relief. The video ended with testimonials, a grandfather crying as he thanked me, a mother with her baby, saying I'd given them hope when they had none left. The applause was deafening. I stood up on shaky legs and walked to the podium. The director handed me a plaque, heavy and real in my hands. I looked out at my family beaming in the front rows, at the reporters with their cameras, at the crowd of people who'd come to celebrate this work, and I thought about my parents at the mall with my sister. "Thank you," I started, my voice surprisingly steady. "This award means everything to me, but it's not really about me. It's about the 47 families who trusted me to fight for them." I paused, my hand moving unconsciously to my stomach. This wasn't how I'd planned to announce it, but they'd made their choice, and I was done waiting for perfect moments that would never come. "This work nearly cost me everything," I continued. "During those 5 days, I was 12 weeks pregnant with twins. I didn't tell anyone because I knew I'd be pulled off the case, and these families needed help immediately. I risked my health and my pregnancy, and I'd do it again, because that's what justice requires sometimes. Sacrifice." The room went completely still. Then my grandmother started clapping, standing up, tears streaming down her face. My aunt and uncle jumped up beside her. Soon the entire audience was on their feet. I looked down at my phone on the podium, where notifications were flooding in. The ceremony was being live-streamed. My announcement was public, spreading across social media in real time. Someone in my extended family had posted, "So proud of our Natalie, saving families while pregnant with twins. Some people show up when it matters, some people don't." A local news account posted, "Humanitarian award recipient reveals she was pregnant during flood rescue work." And then I saw it, my sister's Instagram story, posted 20 minutes ago. A photo of her and my parents at an upscale boutique, shopping bags in hand, all smiling. Caption, "Best shopping day with my favorite people." The contrast was devastating. And it was public, viral. People were already commenting, connecting the dots, sharing screenshots between my sister's post and the live stream. I accepted congratulations from what felt like hundreds of people. My grandmother stayed close, her hand on my back, steadying me through it all. My phone exploded with messages, texts, calls, notifications, but nothing from my parents or sister. Not yet, anyway. The first call came at 10:30 that night. My father. I stared at his name on my screen for 3 rings before answering. "Natalie." His voice cracked. "We need to talk. Now you want to talk. We didn't know. About the babies. About what you went through during the floods. If we'd known, you would have what? Come to the ceremony?" I was still in my dress, the award plaque on the coffee table. "You didn't need to know about the pregnancy to show up." Silence. Then quietly, "I know." My mother's voice came through in the background, muffled but crying. Not delicate charity event tears. Raw, real crying. "Can I come over?" my father asked. "Not tonight." "I need time." After I hung up, my sister called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "I'm so sorry. Please call me back." I turned my phone face down and closed my eyes. Over the next 3 days, my phone didn't stop. Messages, calls, reports from extended family about conversations they'd had with my parents. The picture that emerged was complicated, human. My mother had locked herself in her bedroom for hours after seeing the ceremony video. My aunt found her looking through old photo albums, pictures of me she'd barely glanced at in years. "I always felt like I failed her," my mother had told my aunt. "She was so smart, so capable. Nothing like me. I didn't know how to connect with her. Your sister needed me. Natalie never seemed to need anything." My aunt had been blunt. "I told her that was bullshit, that you needed her just as much but learned to hide it." My father's crisis was different. My uncle said he'd broken down on the phone, admitting something he'd never said out loud. "I was jealous," he'd confessed. "My daughter is doing exactly what I told her would fail, and she's succeeding. She's making a real difference. She's who I should have been, and I've been punishing her for it." My uncle had responded simply, "So stop punishing her and start fixing it." My sister's unraveling was perhaps the most dramatic. She'd had a panic attack when she realized what her Instagram post had done. The timing, the optics, the viral comparison. She'd deleted it immediately, but screenshots lived forever. She'd called my grandmother, Sobbing, my grandmother had been less sympathetic. "You've built your entire identity on being the favorite," my grandmother had told her. "You've never had to figure out who you are because you've been too busy maintaining your position. You need to learn who you are when you're not being chosen over someone else." My sister had started therapy twice a week, diving into the realization that her dependence on our parents wasn't just financial, it was existential. She'd never developed her own sense of self because she'd been too busy being the golden child. "I don't know who I am without them telling me I'm special," she'd told my grandmother. "I don't know how to do anything on my own, and now I'm the villain in this story and I don't know how to fix it." I listened to all these reports with mixed feelings. Part of me felt vindicated. They were finally seeing what they'd done, finally feeling the consequences. But another part felt uncomfortable with their suffering. They were human. Flawed, yes, but human. My mother's texts became more frequent, more raw. "I spent so long trying to relive my youth through your sister that I forgot to see you. I forgot to ask what you needed. I'm so sorry. I saw the video of you carrying those boxes while pregnant. I should have been there helping you. I should have been your mother. I'm ashamed. I'm so ashamed of what I've done to you." My father's texts were shorter, more stilted, like he was struggling with words that didn't come naturally. "I was wrong about your work. I was wrong about you. Can we please talk? I need to explain, or try to. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I should have said it every day." My sister's messages were the longest, pages of stream of consciousness apologies and self-reflection. I knew they favored me. I've always known. And I liked it, which makes me a terrible person. I was so scared of losing that favoritism that I never questioned if it was right. "I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to understand why I am the way I am. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm trying to be better." I read all of it. I felt all of it. But I didn't respond. Because recognition isn't the same as change. Feeling guilty isn't the same as doing better. They were devastated now, with social pressure and public humiliation forcing them to confront their behavior. But would they still be devastated in 3 months? 6 months? When the attention faded and old patterns became comfortable again? My grandmother said it best when she came over 5 days after the ceremony. "They're hurting," she said, settling into my couch with tea. "That's real. But hurt isn't the same as transformation. Anyone can feel bad when they're caught. The question is whether they'll put in the actual work to change." My grandmother called a family meeting 2 weeks after the ceremony, not at my parents' house or mine, neutral ground, at her apartment. My parents, my sister, and me. No extended family. This was for immediate family only. I almost didn't go. But my grandmother had asked, and I couldn't say no to her. When I arrived, my parents and sister were already there, sitting on opposite ends of her couch like children called to the principal's office. My mother had lost weight. My father looked exhausted. My sister's expensive highlights were growing out. "Sit," my grandmother said to me, gesturing to an armchair. She remained standing. "I'm going to tell you all a story," she began. "And you're going to listen without interrupting." She told us about my grandfather, about working in his business from the beginning, handling books, managing clients, keeping everything running, about how my uncle turned 18 and suddenly became the heir apparent while she was relegated to administrative tasks. "I told myself it was just how things were," she said, her voice steady but hands trembling. "That's what women did then. But it wasn't about era or tradition. It was about your grandfather believing sons mattered more than wives." She looked at my father. "You grew up watching your mother be dismissed. You grew up believing that was normal. And then you had 2 daughters. And you brought those same patterns into your own family." My father opened his mouth. But my grandmother held up her hand. "I watched you do to Natalie what your father did to me," she continued. "I watched you favor one daughter over the other. And I said nothing. I told myself you'd figure it out. I was wrong to stay silent." She turned to my mother. "You gave up your career for motherhood. A valid choice. But then you tried to live through your younger daughter instead of supporting both children as they actually were." My mother cried silently. "And you," my grandmother said to my sister, "you've been a prisoner of favoritism. You've never developed real strength because you've always had their approval. That's not your fault. Children don't choose these dynamics. But you're an adult now. It's your responsibility to break free." The room was silent except for my mother's quiet sobs. "Natalie is pregnant with twins, my great-grandchildren, and I will not allow them to grow up in a family that repeats these patterns." She walked to her desk and pulled out a folder. "I've updated my will. Natalie and her children are now primary beneficiaries, not as punishment, but as protection. My father stood up abruptly. Mom, you don't need to… Sit down. He sat. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. If you want to be part of these children's lives, you will do the work. Real work. Consistent therapy. Changed behavior. Showing up not just when it's convenient, but every time. She looked at each of them. You will not have access to Natalie or her children unless you prove, through sustained action, that you've changed. Months of therapy. Respecting Natalie's decisions. Understanding that trust is rebuilt slowly, if at all. How long? My sister asked, her voice small. As long as it takes, my grandmother said. This isn't a test with a finish line. This is fundamental change. And Natalie decides, at every step, whether your efforts are genuine. She placed her hand on my shoulder. I failed you by staying quiet. I won't fail your children. They will know family is built on consistent love, not conditional approval. My mother spoke, her voice broken. We love her. We love Natalie. We just didn't know how to show it. Then learn, my grandmother said simply. Love is a verb. It requires action. Can I say something? I asked quietly. My grandmother nodded. I looked at my parents and sister. I want you in my life. I want you to know your grandchildren. But I can't keep being the one who adapts, who forgives, who makes it easy for you to keep hurting me. If you want back in, you have to do the work. And I get to decide if the work is enough. My father was crying now too. We'll do whatever it takes. Then start by actually doing it, I said. Not grand gestures, not expensive gifts, just consistent, boring showing up. For months, for years. However long it takes for me to trust you won't disappear the next time I'm not convenient. My grandmother squeezed my shoulder. Meeting adjourned. Everyone out except Natalie. They left quietly, separately. My grandmother and I sat in silence. Thank you, I finally said. I should have done it decades ago, but at least I'm doing it now. At least your babies will grow up protected. I touched my stomach, feeling the flutter of movement. Protected. They would be protected. The nightmares started a week after the family meeting. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. In the dreams, my children were grown, asking why they never got to know their grandparents. You took that choice from us, dream daughter would say. I'd wake up gasping, reaching for my phone to call my parents and take it all back. Then I'd remember why I'd set the boundaries, and the guilt would twist into something more complicated. Was I being cruel? Taking away their grandchildren as punishment? Would my kids resent me someday? My therapist's office became my refuge. Twice a week, I'd sit on her couch and try to untangle the emotions. Tell me about the guilt, she'd say. I feel like I'm doing to them what they did to me, excluding them. Is that what you're doing? I'd think about it. No, I'm protecting myself, protecting my children. But it still feels cruel. Protection and punishment can look similar from the outside, she'd say. But they come from different places. Are you cutting them off to hurt them, or to keep yourself safe? Safe, I'd whisper. But what if I'm wrong? What evidence would you need to believe they've changed? That was the question keeping me up at night. What would be enough? 3 months of therapy? 6? How many times would they need to show up before I could trust they wouldn't disappear again? My best friend found me crying over baby clothes one evening. What's wrong? I bought 2 sets of everything, I said, holding up tiny socks. One to wear, one to save. But what if they ask about their grandparents? What if they want to know why there aren't more people in their baby photos? So you'll tell them the truth. What truth? That I was hurt and kept them away? That sounds vindictive. She took the socks from my hands. The truth is that you set boundaries to protect your kids from a pattern of conditional love. You left the door open for change but required evidence first. That's not vindictive, that's wisdom. But wisdom felt lonely. Sitting in my apartment at night, feeling the baby's kick, knowing that in another reality I'd be calling my mom about every flutter. Instead, I called my grandmother. They're moving a lot today, I'd tell her. Good, strong babies, just like their mother. The updates came through my grandmother. My parents were in therapy, individually and as a couple. My sister had gotten a job and moved into her own apartment. They were trying. They were changing. But were they changing for me? Or because the social consequences were too severe? How could I tell the difference? You might never know for sure, my therapist said. Change motivated by shame can become genuine growth, but you don't owe them the benefit of the doubt until they've earned it. My uncle called one afternoon. Your dad wanted you to know he's been volunteering at a legal aid clinic. He didn't want you to think he was doing it for points. My father, who'd dismissed my work as not real law, was volunteering at legal aid. Was it genuine? Performative? Did it matter if it helped people? I don't know how to trust them again, I told my grandmother one night. My feet were propped on her ottoman, swollen and aching. Trust isn't all or nothing, she said. You can trust them with small things and see how they handle it. Trust gets rebuilt in pieces, not all at once. But what if they resent me? What if this ruins our relationship permanently? Sweetheart, the relationship was already ruined. You're not breaking something whole. You're deciding whether to try rebuilding something broken, and you get to set the terms. I touched my belly, feeling one baby kick while the other slept. Two tiny humans who would depend on me to make the right choices. What if I'm being too harsh? What if my hurt is making me rigid? My grandmother was quiet. There's a difference between rigidity and standards. Rigid is saying, you can never come back. Standards is saying, you can come back when you've shown consistent change. You've set standards, not barriers. Then why does it feel so bad? Because you love them, she said simply. And love complicates everything. It makes us want to forgive before forgiveness is earned. But love also means protecting the most vulnerable. And right now, that's these babies. Your job is to protect them, even if it means being the bad guy in someone else's story. I nodded, tears sliding down my face. The babies kicked again, both of them this time. They're going to be okay, my grandmother said. Even if your parents never fully come back, even if this family never heals completely, these babies will have you and me and an extended family that shows up. That's enough. I wanted to believe her. Most days I almost did. 3 months into the separation, real consequences emerged in ways my parents couldn't ignore. My father lost a major client. The CEO had seen the viral video, connected the dots, and quietly moved their business elsewhere. My uncle told me over coffee. He's not handling it well, my uncle said. He keeps saying it's not fair that his professional life shouldn't be affected by personal mistakes. But it is affected, I said, stirring my decaf. I was 7 months pregnant now, carrying every ounce of the twins. My mother's social circle shrank too. Country club friends stopped inviting her to events. The lunch dates dried up. One cousin overheard a conversation at a charity gala about how some people don't deserve to be mothers. My grandmother reported all of this with a neutral expression. Just facts. How's my sister? I asked. Struggling. The job is demanding. She had a breakdown last week when her boss criticized her work. She's not used to being told she's not good enough. I felt a complicated twist in my chest. Part satisfaction. Finally, she was experiencing what I'd felt. But also sadness that we'd all had to break before thinking about healing. My parents tried, in their way. My father sent weekly flower arrangements with cards saying, thinking of you and the babies. My mother sent gift baskets. Baby items, pregnancy books. My sister wrote long emails about therapy progress, job struggles, building a life independent of their approval. But I'd asked for consistency, not gifts. Real change, not performances. After 2 months of gestures, I asked my grandmother to tell them to stop. They're trying, she said gently. They're shopping their way out of discomfort. That's not the same. The gifts stopped. For a week, nothing. No contact, no messages. I wondered if they'd given up. Then my uncle called. Your father asked if he could come to one of your prenatal appointments. Not to talk to you, just to sit in the waiting room. To be nearby. He wanted me to ask because he was afraid you'd say no. I thought about it for 3 days. My therapist and I spent an entire session discussing it. What do you want? She asked. I want him to have cared before it was almost too late. But he didn't, so what do you want now? Finally, I want to see if he can follow a simple boundary. Sit in a waiting room without making it about him. I said yes, with conditions. He could come. He could sit in the waiting room. He could not approach me, speak to me, or make demands. If he violated any boundary, he'd leave and the trial period would end. The day of the appointment, I arrived early with my grandmother. My father was already there, sitting in the far corner, reading a magazine. He looked up, eyes filling with tears. But he didn't move. He just nodded once and went back to his magazine. I checked in, sat down, waited. My grandmother held my hand. My father stayed in his corner. When my name was called, I waddled toward the exam room. As I passed, our eyes met for a second. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I didn't respond, but I didn't tell him to leave either. After the appointment, babies healthy and enormous, I came out to find him still there. Over an hour of waiting. When he saw me, he stood, then stopped himself from approaching. He picked up his coat, nodded once, and left. Such a small thing. sitting in a waiting room, following boundaries, not making demands. But it was the first time he'd done exactly what I'd asked without making it about his feelings. My grandmother squeezed my hand. That was hard for him? Good, I said, but my voice was softer than expected. 2 weeks later, my mother asked to do the same. Same conditions, same boundaries. She came, sat quietly, didn't approach. When I came out, she was crying silently, tissues balled in her hands. But she didn't make a scene. She just left. My sister sent an email asking if she could send something she'd made herself, not bought. A baby blanket she'd been learning to knit. I've had to restart it 4 times, I'm terrible at it. But I wanted to make something with my own hands. Something that required effort. You don't have to keep it. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to learn how to do hard things. The blanket arrived a week later, lumpy and uneven, with dropped stitches, also clearly made with painstaking effort. I cried when I pulled it out of the box. These weren't grand gestures or dramatic reconciliations. They were small, awkward attempts at respecting boundaries and putting in effort. I didn't know if it was enough. I didn't know if it would last. But it was different than before. And different was a start. The twins arrived 3 weeks early on a Tuesday morning. My water broke while reviewing a brief at my desk. My grandmother drove me to the hospital while my hands shook too much to hold my phone. Call the family, I managed between contractions. Which family? She asked carefully. All of them. They should know. The labor was long, 18 hours of contractions and exhaustion. My grandmother stayed the whole time, holding my hand, telling me I was doing great even when I was certain I was dying. My aunt and uncle arrived around hour 6. My cousins during hour 10. The waiting room filled with extended family who'd shown up at the ceremony, who'd called and visited throughout the pregnancy. My parents and sister arrived separately around hour 12. My grandmother went out to speak with them. They're asking if they can see her, she reported back. I told them that was up to you. I was too exhausted to think straight. Not yet, after the babies are born. Maybe. At 2 in the morning, my daughter was born. 3 minutes later, my son followed. Small but healthy, crying loudly, perfect in every impossible way. When the nurse placed them in my arms, one on each side, I understood why my grandmother had fought so hard. These tiny humans were mine to protect, mine to keep safe from anything that could hurt them, even from their own grandparents. The extended family came in first, in small groups. They held the babies, took pictures, cried happy tears. My aunt whispered that my parents were still waiting, 14 hours now. Do you want to see them? She asked gently. I looked at my children, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the complicated dynamics surrounding them. Yes, but separately, one at a time, only a few minutes. My father came in first. He stood in the doorway, staring at the babies, tears streaming down his face. He'd aged in 6 months, more gray hair, deeper lines. Natalie, he said, voice breaking, they're beautiful. You can come closer, but don't touch them yet. He approached slowly, looked down at the sleeping twins, tears falling faster. I'm so sorry. For everything. For missing so much. For failing you. I didn't respond. Just watched him look at his grandchildren. I know I have to earn my way back, he said. I'm in therapy twice a week, volunteering at the legal aid clinic, trying to understand why I became the kind of father who could miss his daughter's biggest moments. That's good. But it's only been 6 months. I need to see consistency over years. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Whatever it takes. However long. I let him stay 5 more minutes before asking him to leave. My mother came in next, hands shaking, face swollen from crying. Oh, Natalie. They're perfect. You can look but don't touch. She nodded, moved closer, stared at them, then looked at me. I've started therapy too, twice a week. We're working on why I projected onto your sister. Why I couldn't see you for who you were. That's what your therapist says. What do you say? I say she's right. I was a terrible mother to you. I'm ashamed and determined to be better. They deserve better. You deserved better. I let her stay a bit longer, then asked her to leave. My sister came in last, looking exhausted and anxious. Hi, she said softly. Hi. She approached carefully. They're so small. 6 pounds each. I made them something else. She pulled out a package. Matching hats. Not perfect, but I made them. I unwrapped them. 2 tiny knitted hats, uneven, but made with obvious care. Thank you. I got the job at the nonprofit that helps displaced families. Working there for 2 months. I thought you should know. I looked at her. Why that job? Because I wanted to understand what you do, why it matters. I met a mother last week who cried because we helped her keep her apartment. She said we saved her family, and I thought about you doing that every day. And now you understand? I'm starting to. About privilege. About what I've taken for granted. About who I could be if I actually tried. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying to be someone these babies wouldn't be ashamed to know. I felt tears sliding down my face. That's going to take time. I know. I'm ready. After she left, I was alone with my babies and grandmother. The room was quiet except for their soft breathing. You did well, my grandmother said. Did I? Letting them see the babies? Was that a mistake? No. It was a boundary. They met their grandchildren on your terms, with your conditions. That's how trust rebuilds. Carefully, slowly, with clear expectations. I touched each baby's tiny hand. What now? Now they prove themselves. Monthly supervised visits, continued therapy. Respect for your decisions. If they can do that consistently, then maybe in a year or two, things can grow. And if they can't, then these babies will grow up surrounded by the family who showed up. They'll be loved. They'll be fine. I nodded, exhausted and cautiously hopeful. My parents had hurt me deeply, but they were trying. The question was whether trying would turn into being. Only time would tell. 2 years passed in the way time does with young children, simultaneously crawling and flying. My twins were now toddlers with opinions and personalities and an alarming ability to climb everything. My parents had kept their promises. Therapy every week, monthly supervised visits that became every other week after the first year, showing up to small moments, first steps, first words, birthdays. They followed every boundary, never pushed for more than I was willing to give. But distance remained, a formality that hadn't existed before. The twins called my grandmother Grandma. She babysat every Tuesday, knew their favorite songs, was the one they ran to for comfort. My parents were Linda and Robert. Names, not titles. I'd never explicitly told the twins to call them that. It just happened when you're not really someone's grandparent in function, only biology. My father noticed. I saw the way his face fell every time my son toddled past him calling Grandma to my grandmother, but he never complained. Never demanded. Just kept showing up, kept being respectful. My mother had gone back to school for social work. I want to understand people better, she'd told me during one visit. I want to be able to help, the way you help people. She volunteered at a women's shelter now. 18 months consistently, long past the point where anyone was watching. My sister had perhaps changed most dramatically. She'd kept the nonprofit job, got promoted, started dating someone who worked in sustainable housing. She sent the twins birthday cards she made herself, crafted with obvious effort and questionable artistic skill. But our bond remained fragile. We were cordial. We could talk about work or weather. We saw each other at family events, but we weren't really sisters. We were two people who shared DNA and a complicated past, trying to build something from ruins while knowing some things might stay broken forever. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? My best friend asked while our kids played at the park. I watched my twins on the slide, my grandmother on a nearby bench, my parents standing at a respectful distance. I don't know if it's about forgiveness, I said. It's about acceptance. Accepting that they hurt me. Accepting that they're trying. Accepting that effort doesn't erase harm, but it also matters. Do the kids notice the distance? Not yet. They're too young. But they will eventually. My father had started a foundation funding legal aid organizations. He'd named it after me, the Natalie Foundation. I'd asked him not to, but he'd done it anyway. One of the few times he'd pushed back. I need people to know my daughter taught me what really matters, he'd said when I confronted him. It felt complicated. Genuine effort, yes, but also absolution he hadn't fully earned. Everything felt complicated these days. My mother had asked carefully if she could take the twins to the aquarium, with me present, but letting her lead. I'd said yes, watched her fumble through the outing nervously, checking constantly, making sure she was doing everything right. She was trying so hard it was almost painful to watch. Afterward, my daughter had held my mother's hand walking to the car, just reached up and took it naturally. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That was good, my grandmother said later. You're letting them build something. Am I? Or am I setting them up for disappointment if my parents revert? You're giving them a chance. That's all you can do. The relationship with my sister was perhaps hardest to navigate. She'd sent me a long letter on my birthday. Handwritten, 10 pages, acknowledging every privilege, every time she'd been chosen while I'd been overlooked. Not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging. I'd cried reading it. Then I'd put it in a drawer. I didn't know what to do with her accountability except hold it and recognize it existed. "I know we're not really sisters anymore," she'd said during one family dinner. "I know I can't fix what I took from you, but I want you to know I see it now. All of it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life being different." "Okay," I'd said. Because what else was there? At the twins' second birthday party, my parents arrived with thoughtful presents, books they'd carefully chosen based on what the twins actually liked. They stayed, helped clean up, left without drama. It was normal, boring, unglamorous. It was also so much better than what had come before. But it wasn't healed. It wasn't whole. It was just different. As I tucked my children into bed that night, reading stories while my grandmother cleaned up and my parents drove home, I realized this was probably as good as it would get. Not a fairy tale reconciliation. Not a perfect family reunion. Just people trying their best, respecting boundaries, showing up consistently. It wasn't everything I'd wanted, but maybe it was enough. The twins turned 3 on a Sunday in March. We'd rented the community room at my grandmother's retirement complex. She'd moved there 6 months ago when the stairs became too much. She was frailer now, but her mind was sharp. The room was packed. My aunt and uncle who'd shown up at the ceremony, my cousins and their children, the extended family who'd filled that waiting room, my best friend, colleagues who'd become friends, and in the corner, keeping respectful distance, my parents and sister. 3 years since that group chat. 3 years of therapy, boundaries, supervised visits, and slow reconstruction. The dynamic had settled into something stable, if not warm. My parents came to birthdays and holidays, sent cards, respected every boundary. They never asked for more than I offered. But the twins still called them Linda and Robert. Still ran first to my grandmother. Still didn't quite understand why these peripheral adults were at events, but not really part of daily life. My daughter was blowing out candles when I caught my father's expression, watching with tears, standing at celebration's edge, close enough to witness, not close enough to intrude. It would have been easy to feel sorry for him, to soften boundaries. But I remembered being 12, winning that science fair, my mother talking about my sister's dance recital instead. I remembered my graduation, my first big case, the hospital, all the times I'd needed them and they'd chosen elsewhere. They were here now, but now didn't erase then. After most guests left, my mother approached carefully. "They're wonderful children. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you. I know things aren't what they could be, but I'm grateful for what we have, for being allowed to be here, even at the edges." She'd changed. Genuinely. She volunteered weekly, went back to school, showed up consistently. But change didn't erase damage. "I appreciate that," I said. "Do you think someday the twins might call us Grandma and Grandpa?" The question she'd held back for 3 years. "I don't know. That's up to them. When they're old enough to understand the history, maybe, or maybe not. I'm not forcing it." She nodded, eyes filling. "That's fair." My sister was sitting with my grandmother. I joined them. "I got engaged last month," my sister said. "I wanted to tell you in person." I felt complicated emotions. Happy for her, genuinely, but aware we'd never have the sister relationship we should have had. "Congratulations. You don't have to come to the wedding. I'll come. We're family. Complicated, but family." My grandmother squeezed my hand, conserving energy. "Proud of you. You protected them. You broke the cycle." "Did I? It feels messy and incomplete." "Because real life is messy. But look at them." She gestured to the twins building with blocks. "They're confident, secure. They know they're loved unconditionally. You gave them that." I watched my children, these small humans who'd changed everything. "What happens if you're not here?" I asked quietly. "Then you keep doing what you're doing. Keep those boundaries, keep protecting these babies. Remember that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up consistently, who choose you over and over." The twins ran over, demanding a story. My grandmother pulled them onto her lap. My parents watched from across the room, not invited into this intimate moment, not quite excluded, but not quite included. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined. No tearful reunion, no perfect forgiveness. My relationship with my parents remained formal. My sister and I were cordial but distant. But my children were thriving, loved completely, never conditionally. They'd never be the disappointing child, the overlooked one. That was the victory. Not punishing my parents forever, but creating something new. A family built on choice and consistency instead of obligation and favoritism. Later, driving home with sleeping twins in car seats, I thought about breaking the cycle. I'd paid a price. The loss of the family I'd wanted, the distance, the knowledge that some things were permanently broken, but I'd gained integrity, boundaries, self-respect, and children who would never doubt their worth. The twins grew up knowing Linda and Robert were people who'd made mistakes and were working to do better. They called my grandmother Grandma until she passed peacefully when they were 7, surrounded by family who genuinely loved her. They understood eventually that family is complicated, but consistency matters more than perfection. My parents remained peripheral but present. My sister and I developed cordial friendship, not sisterhood, but something honest. The extended family remained the core, the safe haven. My father's foundation continued funding legal aid work. My mother kept volunteering at the shelter. My sister married and eventually had children of her own, breaking cycles in her own way. The twins grew into confident children who never questioned their worth. And me? I continued my work, continued protecting families, continued building the life I'd fought for. Not perfect, not what I'd once dreamed, but real, honest, and mine. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. And real was enough. And real